Good afternoon. I wanted to clarify a couple of issues on the election of 1800 and why it is considered more for what didn't happen than almost for more than what did happen. Now, let me explain that. We were, as a new nation, not even quite 12 years old. And I'm using 1787 when we first wrote our declaration, our Constitution. And then through the 1790s, which was a decade of certainly anxiety and challenges for the new nation. George Washington was definitely a steady hand from 1791 through 1796. John Adams, who you see here in the upper left-hand corner in the image, became president in 1796 and took office in March of 1797. Okay. And he was a Federalist. He belonged to the Federalist Party. Remember, Alexander Hamilton was the leader of the Federalist Party. And the Federalist Party was in control of both houses of Congress. So you would have thought that John Adams would have had an easy time of it, but he didn't. And one of the reasons why he didn't have an easy time was because he and Alexander Hamilton certainly really never got along. And John Adams was presented with a number of foreign policy challenges that he negotiated his way out of. Not everybody was happy with the outcome of those negotiations. So by the time 1797, 1798 roll around, John Adams is seen as a relatively weak and ineffective president. Then came the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. And these acts were pushed through by a Federalist-controlled Congress who were really afraid that the country was going to be really taken over by these French revolutionaries who were going to come from France, from Paris. The French were going through their French Revolution. It was terribly bloody. It was very disturbing to us. And certainly we were afraid of these French radicals in particular. And the Federalist Party, which of course supported England in the war between the French and the English, saw it as an opportunity really to push through these Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay. And there were four of them, primarily aimed at foreigners. They were aimed at people who spoke seditious words, meaning you were perhaps bad-mouthing the president or bad-mouthing the party in power at the moment. You could also have been accused, let's say, of promoting French interests in the country above, English interests. It was a very, very unsettling time, much like it is today. Okay. Against that kind of backdrop, we had an election. And these four men were running for the presidency. You had John Adams. Underneath him, with 73 electoral votes, and that's what those numbers mean, was Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr was a New Yorker. Alexander Hamilton was a New Yorker. And Alexander Hamilton's hatred of Aaron Burr would, in a way, throw the election to the man in the top right-hand corner. That was Thomas Jefferson. The gentleman below Jefferson was Charles Pinckney, who was also running for president. He was from South Carolina. But I want you to look at the numbers, and you can see that both Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson both had gotten 73 electoral votes. This was a time when if whoever won the most electoral votes became president, and whoever won the second most electoral votes then became vice president. Well, we could see right away that this was not a good way to work. It wasn't a good process. So we're going to have to change that very quickly. But the problem at hand was we had two men who had both gotten the same amount of electoral votes, and how the Constitution handled this issue was that it would be the House of Representatives who would make a decision. They each had one vote. Each state had one vote. They would be the ones to make the decision as to who would become president. And of course, there was a lot of what we use a term in politics called horse trading, meaning you do this for me, I'll do that for you, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And, eventually what happened was when the decision as to who would become president had to go, went to the House, it took 36 votes before they actually came up with a winner. And that winner turned out to be Thomas Jefferson. So here's Jefferson, a Democratic Republican, and here's Aaron Burr. He would be second now, vice president. And really, the person who was most influential in this whole election in having Thomas Jefferson elected was Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton did not like Jefferson. It sounds like Alexander Hamilton didn't like many people, except Alexander Hamilton. But he disliked Thomas Jefferson primarily because of his politics, but he hated Aaron Burr and thought that he was a crazy man. You can understand why 3 years later, Aaron Burr will shoot and kill Alexander Hamilton in a duel. But in any case, this election of 1800, it took a while for the decisions to be made. And it was really the first time that the House of Representatives would have to make a decision about who would become president. But almost more importantly, while all of this was going on, what I want you to remember about this election of 1800 is that it was the first time ever that that one political party, meaning the Federalists, peacefully turned over power to another political party. There was no rioting in the streets. There were no protesters. Basically, the people who could vote and the people who were watching this election let the process work its way through. And it came out that we had really experienced our first peaceful transition of power from one political party to another, without bloodshed, without a coup d'etat, without anybody really raising a gun. And that's why this is important to remember, because for 250 years or so, we have had peaceful transitions of power from one political party to another. I cannot recall, even in 2000 with the Bush and Gore fiasco that took place, where people in record numbers were taking to the streets and really creating these massive protests. Once in a while, you would see a couple people standing up, with a sign as others drove by, letting them know what their opinion was about something. But we have always had peaceful transitions of power, and and in all seriousness, one of the challenges that we're seeing perhaps in this November, and this is not anything I'm making up because it's all, both Republicans and Democrats are talking about it and everybody else in between, is that if Donald Trump loses this election, he's going to say that it was rigged, like the 2016 election. So if he loses, he will definitely protest the results. And if he wins, the Democrats will probably protest the results, particularly if the Democratic candidate wins the popular vote. So this election is really going to be one to watch. Okay. All right. I hope this is clear. There's a lot more details, but you know what? You don't need to know all the details. Basically, what I told you is something that is very, I think will clear up any of the questions you might have. Okay.